welcome. We're going to chat AI, synthetic data, privacy, all of it wrapped up into one piece because it's hard to separate and we shouldn't separate them all. I'm going to get you guys to introduce yourselves. And firstly, who are you? What do you do in human language? And then if you could take the first question that I've given you and sort of wrap it up, what's blowing your mind lately in this space? Or what have you been surprised by in a good or bad way? Kellen, welcome.
Hello, I'm Kellen, Head of Digital at Zenith. What I do and what I'm supposed to do might be slightly different, but I'm in charge of the innovation and craft of our digital product at Zenith, but I often spend a lot of my time dabbling in all things AI and applied AI. Something that's blown my mind recently, it's fun, but I use the term fun very loosely. But applying the strength of reasoning models and AI assistance to a fully connected data dashboard. And when you're like, can you give me 3 insights? Can you build that dashboard for me? Can you add it to my profile? Can I share it with this colleague? Like their interactivity of some of those toys that we have now is, I'm loving it.
Fantastic. Chris, welcome.
Hi, so Chris Manson, I'm Country Director for Ogre. For those who don't know, Ogre is ad tech, privacy-focused ad tech solution. We're building personas. We're trying to generate and build personas as an audience methodology, or personified advertising, as we call it. As you can tell, I'm also head of not looking anything like the headshot from about 5 years ago. So that's an upsetting position to also have. I might call out a couple pieces. Probably haven't blown my mind. That might be a bit of a stretch, but I would say. 2 areas that we sort of focused on over the past couple of years. First one's around zero-party data, essentially data that is proactively provided to us. It's unincentivized data. It's data that is not connected to any personal information for us as well. So it's a different way of looking at data solutions, I'd say. But the second piece is around how we actually go about collecting that data and how we actually go about using the data. So our approach is essentially running thousands of different zero-party data survey questions across open web. We spoke about open web before. And it's with intent to try and understand what types of audiences or what types of personas are more than likely to be visiting certain environments, certain pieces of content, certain articles, that sort of thing. So essentially qualifying the open web a little bit more. So I guess the call out is the different sort of approach is going about qualifying places instead of qualifying people.
Got it. Thank you. Fred.
And I'm Freddie Chenu. As of today, 14 minutes ago, officially the executive chairman of In Marketing We Trust.
Hey.
But previously, I was the chief innovation officer in human language and non-roaring title. That is throwing on the wall, see if it sticks, working with our teams and our clients' teams to try R&D. And a lot of my time the last 2 years has been rolling out AI, Gen AI, and solutions to move companies forward in that journey. The thing that recently blew my mind is seeing one of our analysts, rather junior one, taking data from our analytics and some of the media buying, because they had a hunch that some of the media was in the made for advertising. Was spent in made-for-advertising ad fraud environment. They connected that to Le Chat, Mistral environment and gone, here's the data, I've got the hunch, can you look it up? And the tool started running patterns against known data source that were validated, clean traffic, and started going, that channel looks a bit off. You might want to look into that area, especially when we working with international environments, nascent environments. That was fantastic, because the sort of things that would have taken a senior weeks to start investigating, a junior could do that in minutes. I mean, they're pretty good and they're really used to the tools, but that's the sort of things that we go, wow, okay, that's really different in terms of how we have outsized returns of people using the tools correctly.
I love that. That's really cool. All right, let's start with you, Kellen. As you said, your job sometimes is, you're often running. I know you, and anyone who knows you, you're often a few steps ahead of all of us. But in the day-to-day work that you do, planning, buying, activation, where's AI and data, that connection, having the biggest impact in the agency so far, and what's still overhyped?
You pull a JJ there and asked 3 questions in one sentence.
I did.
Cool, awesome. Okay, so I think for the first one, where we are using AI and applying to data, I think I can talk to you about optimization within platform, using over 200 different signals for every time there's an auction. But I could have said that a year ago, the year before. I think what would be more interesting of this time is to talk about what's changed in the last year, what's been different. And I was putting a presentation together the other day, and I was looking at the Google trend for the term synthetic data and how it's just boomed in the last 2 years. But the reality is that all of our business tech intelligence analytics teams, they've been using synthetic data for many, many years. It's just now really being talked about and used. And I would say that for me, it's 2 things that's really changed year on year. One, it's actually how connected our data sets have become, that when you do apply AI, it's getting a lot more significant insights out of that. So for instance, if I were to apply AI to a data set before, try and get some insights out of it, it will say that your brand has increased because you spent more, but it didn't have any idea what was in the media plan, that we were running TV and market at that stage. Now that all that data is we've gone through the tedium of unified taxonomies and all this stuff sitting in place, when you apply AI to that, far more powerful. So that's number one. It's more about the data than the AI. And the second thing with synthetic, so again, we've been using it for years, but it's been in the back of the office. And I think a few strategists have kind of cottoned onto the application of synthetic data and bringing it to the front house. And I think that's where things are starting to get a little bit more spicy and using it in different ways.
So talk us through that. So
Okay, cool. So when we talk about back office use of synthetic, imagine, so if you're building a dashboard and you don't actually have the client data, I can just go and generate some synthetic data and use it to build that out. For Greg, if you're using for insurance policies, you might be able to use synthetic data to identify potential bias in your insurance policy. So for instance, you can take all of your first-party data, create a synthetic copy, change out the demographics, the age, the ethnicities, etc., and try to see if there's any policy acceptance bias according to something. So that's an interesting use of data. There's another one. Oh, you could probably do the same thing with HR too. I mean, I saw an interesting stat the other day that a few years ago people were sending out maybe 20 to 30 different applications for jobs when they got out of uni, but now it's closer to 100 to 300. So you can imagine how much your HR departments are inundated with this. So the only way to keep up with that is AI. But then using AI to try and see if there's any bias in who you accept applications and things from. So that's all back end. That's all great. I love that. But now we're starting to use it for, if I have a survey data that's only got about 100 to 200 respondents, how do I extrapolate that with AI and potentially use that? I worry about that because it might overexploit the mean and actually not pull in any sort of, the word I'm looking for. So it's a bit of bias, but more like it's not going to necessarily find the insights. It's not going to be predictive. It's only going to tell you what's happened before. So I think we're starting to play with it in the area, but it's still early days.
Great. I mean, I love that back end side of things because we often think about it being used for. I'm going to use the right word here because Journo's in the room. But, the idea of using it for inclusive and removing bias.
That's the word I was thinking for, inclusivity.
Is and I know the telcos and insurance agencies have done a lot in that space, so I think that's really powerful, and we need to talk about how that can be used in a great way.
Yeah.
Awesome. Chris, you sort of mentioned how your company and I guess overall we're trying to build out audiences, segmentation, information that is privacy aware. How I guess if you could go in a bit more detail on that synthetic side of things, data signals that are being used there, and why how it differs from traditional methods and why it's superior. So just sort of wrapping all that up.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think privacy in advertising, it's always had restrictions, limitations attached to it in some way, right? And if you're a if you're a brand or marketer, you've almost had to sacrifice between either audience scale or audience accuracy, audience precision in some way. It was really hard to be able to get both of those right in open web. That's why we've sort of been pushing a persona-based methodology a little bit. But to the call-outs before, like synthetic data does have at least initial attractiveness of what it can potentially do. Its ability to be able to learn off of multiple data sets at scale, producing anonymized audiences off the back of it, add that layer of accuracy becomes interesting. Like you said, though, it's really early days, and I'd say there's going to be a lot of watch-outs and call-outs on its use as well. Call-outs around the initial data source that it's learning off of, the compliancy around that data source that it's learning off of. At the end of the day, how accurate is that actually going to be? Like, I think we'll get into a topic later on, but around the actual transparency, where that data is coming from, how it's being built, the validity of it. So it's exciting, it's interesting. It's definitely not the answer right now, but it's a good starting point for companies to start building around it.
And on that validity side of things, I'm going to go off script a little bit here. Like, are you seeing particular industry or methods that are really getting to the heart of checking the validity of synthetic data? Are we moving forward in that way?
I mean, that's a good one.
Someone
I wouldn't say yeah. I wouldn't say yeah. I mean, what we're starting to see more in I guess, briefs from agencies and marketers at the moment is KPIs springing up around on-target accuracy, on-target percentage and on-target reach. I think we're going to see that a lot more in the next sort of 12 to 18 months, and as a way to actually start to allow vendors to prove the accuracy that they're putting through. And I think Nielsen does studies around this. Kantar probably does something similar. And I believe that's going to start to pop up a lot more in the next sort of next year.
It's going to be interesting because some of that's validated on very old methods and new methods, and trying to make sure, because you need to validate both, really. Yeah. Interesting. Fred, so you work with a whole lot of brands, yeah, creating data strategies. Where are you seeing at the moment, particularly you would be dealing with some big clients, but also a lot of mid-level clients. Where are you seeing sort of real use cases for synthetic or model data at the moment?
So I'll talk about the use cases and practical examples that we're seeing, and then I'll talk about probably the gotchas and the areas where we're like, there's a bit of an emperor's new clothes area. So one of the things where we see really good use of model data, synthetic data, and is when we want to validate creatives or find new ideas on how to run not just more ads, just don't create more garbage, but actually produce better ones. So we go in and have the audience and some of the customer questions, de-anonymized, of course, put into basically a model data, and we run all ads and we run all competitors' ads against that. So imagine you work in a closing environment. You've got a bunch of T-shirts you're trying to sell to men that have a bit more of a dad bod. Anyone that's bought true classics will know what I'm talking about. And we've seen tools basically go and fetch all the Meta or TikTok ads and reference, take that, push that against our model data of what the customers ask and the questions we had for customer service, feedbacks and returns, and go, hey, what are we not talking about? What are the competitors not talking about? And the models and the solutions came out with, well, typically people ask about the longevity of the T-shirts or the fading of the collar or the collar not working correctly, and basically pretty much suggested new creative ideas to run that. And that was awesome. Basically, suddenly we have a whole range of new creative ideas that we can go back to the team and go, hey, that's something. It's a bit weird when you're the data guys going, hey, there's some creative ideas that the tools have produced. But that's on the cool ideas. We're also working with large rideshare company and going, right, what are the interesting information topics that people going to Southeast Asia, going to Europe are worried about, and what information do you need to provide in your media, in your ads for them to sign up or continue using you, that would be interesting, especially if they're flying to KL or they know that flying to Jakarta, driving around Jakarta or Bangkok in peak hours is a 2 or 3 hour affair. And that's the sort of information that is very useful. But those are the cool ideas and cool things that we can use today. The problem I have is, not just me, but the team, is the amount of garbage that we need to filter out before we can actually create a good synthetic data set. If any marketer has a clean CRM, please throw me the first one. But this is the issue. We are working with increasingly poorer and poorer data sets, whether it's multi-touch, whether it's the analytics, and so my worry is we're getting worse and worse data that is going to be thrown in wholesale into a synthetic environment that's create another black box that a black box like an LLM model is going to use to answer your question. So you're creating layers upon layers of abstractions from the real information, and that is certainly the conversations we have with the clients around, well, how do you know the quality? And back to your question, Gay, it's what do we do to ensure the fidelity of the data that we're using in that regard?
So when you're talking around bad quality data there, so obviously, you know, our industry is very quick to go first party data is awesome and the answer for everything. But you were talking a lot around I guess the effectiveness piece and those signals coming through. Is that where you're seeing that quality erode? Is it around that the journey piece rather than the initial consumer data?
Yes, typically, and also when you're working with edge cases, and back to Kelly's point, where it's like if you have a set that is too narrow, then it's just going to tell you what happened and won't have any predictive value. Models, when they are, especially when you start fitting more synthetic data, the models collapse. You basically end up with a very high distribution. If you imagine your standard distribution, it's basically you've got all your data points centered in the middle because you kept on adding the same information. And so you end up with unusable insights and unusable solutions. So it's like, well, cool, you tell me that people prefer the red car. Great. And that's can't really use that. And I've now spent 6 months and hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially doing that.
On your earlier point, on the happier side of the story,
Sorry, not enough coffee.
Just going back to that, that linkage to creative is fantastic because I think we've talked a lot around tailoring creative for a long time. It's either been even DCO has been, you know, very set signals of, you know, we go back to weather or some very obvious ones, or audience segmentation in almost a biased way of how we think about creative. So if that data can go into, you know, dad bod strategies.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think I've got another idea. I think it's one of the areas where we're seeing massive speed up in the creative and the execution is for regulated industries. So we work across the holy trinity of reg and compliance, life science, finance and telco. And for those that work in there, know that you create a campaign, it can take months and months before everything get approved. We found that working with our regs and compliance teams and starting to get why certain ads were approved, not approved, and also what's required, we've been able to streamline a process and work with them to go, okay, that has been checked by a layer, basically validated by a layer of compliance. That reduces the garbage that we produce, and a lawyer go, no, don't do that. And so they start trusting us a bit more in using that. So that's, from that perspective, some of the synthetic data or model data is much better because we know what they're going to reject and then have an answer as to why, to the team, why that campaign has been rejected.
Quickly, because I know the other panel touched on the structural and internal side, but I don't think we can underestimate what we all need to do to move our organisations forward. Any tips, any wins that you've had? I know, Kellen, you've been thinking about this a lot, moving that internal knowledge, confidence, but also wariness, like that nice, responsible level.
Yeah.
Forward.
So I had the privilege of having a dedicated role to applied AI across an agency group. What I thought it was having a profound understanding of how AI works in the technologies and things, teaching people how to use it. But what I found out, it's actually more skill set of behavior change. So I can explain how AI works, I can show people what to do, what not to do, but to get them to start thinking, I should use AI for that. If they ask me a question, my response is, have you asked AI? I know the answer, but I'm still going to push back and have you asked the AI? So I think there's definitely an education part, but then also as an industry body, I think there's so much power in, for instance, I learned recently that just 3 weeks ago, the IAPP, which is the International Association of Privacy Professionals, peeps, they said that actually synthetic data isn't as synthetic as you might think because it's trained of actual real data, so therefore, it creates a whole lot of privacy concerns. Like, we need our people to know that. We need our people to understand that synthetic data isn't necessarily just created out of ChatGPT. There's like hazy or different types of synthetic model. What's the other one? Mostly AI. So there's all sorts of different tools, and I think we can do a lot better just to be like, this is a safe space to play. This is what you need to know. This is what's nice to know, and this is what you shouldn't be doing.
Chris, for you and your clients, I guess, that journey of education, how are you managing that?
Yeah, I mean, our whole industry has been built off of trying to find as much information as possible about consumers and users, right? We've had businesses that have been built around that for the last few decades. So,
I guess centuries, to be honest.
Yeah, true. Yeah, true. So, I'd say it's definitely an internal. I'll take it from an internal perspective. It's definitely an internal cultural shift that needs to take place as well across multiple lines of business. From our perspective, JJ touched on it before around just bringing it back to the consumer and keeping it simple again. Like, I think at the end of the day, if you were to ask anyone outside of our industry, any relative or friend or anything like that who has no connection with our industry whatsoever, and if you were to explain to them in really basic English layman's terms what your data collection method is, sounds like such a boring freaking conversation that we're bringing up. But if you were to ask them and if you were to give them a choice to say yes or no, is that all right? Chances are this, in the practices we're still doing today, it's a lot of no's are still coming out, right? And I think that's an approach that we've always sort of taken as we're building and evolving Ogre as well. And we sort of use it as a bit of a barometer in a way to sense check what we're doing before we start to release and double down.
Right.
For us, so we work with quite a few clients that are going through the digital maturity curve. So you imagine the BCG or the Google classic ones, the S-curve. And what we find is we have almost 2 vectors of developments within our clients and in our own organizations. One is the governance, so having the conversations with your best friends, the lawyers and the regs and compliance team, so that you're actually helping them understand that framework. And you actually help them represent you in the boardroom, because corporate affairs is going to sit in the boardroom, and they can have those conversations down to Kevin's points, explaining what is synthetic data, what are the risks, what are the gotchas, and how we approach that, but also how we can't just have a blanket rule. No, we're not going to collect data. We're not going to use that. We had an example with a European client recently, where our data protection officer wanted to only use 1 week of analytics data and get rid of all the rest because they were worried from a GDPR standpoint. I said, well, you do that, and that's the equivalent of going to your CFO and say you can only use 1 month of financial data. Good luck. I'd like to be in the fly on the wall when that conversation happened. And so there's often the being able to explain to people who's not responsible for that, who don't have KPIs related to performance and revenue, how their decision will have an impact on the bottom line. And that there's no other way of showing that at a company level than when you have those conversations and the potential risk and reward. And on the other side, taking a selected few champions to go from level 1, everyone use the ChatGPTs or ChatGPT of the world to level to, all right, well, let's rework operations, start having workflows and automations to start changing the way we do things. And level 3, almost thinking of new products and new solutions. But that's taking people on a different journey depending on their responsibility and their maturities.
All right, I'm going to put you in competition with Jojo and Rashida's panel earlier and get your one last piece of advice, and then 2 weeks we're going to test what people remember from the event, possibly. So if you could give the industry one piece of advice, what we must prioritise in the next year, ensuring that we're using data and AI in ways that are both commercially sharp and ethically sound. Kellen, what's one thing we should do?
Damn it. One thing. Okay, so that's the thing that I do all the time. It's the education piece. It's our responsibility in our industry to be democratizing the skills and tool sets and the knowledge to our workforce to be able to operate in an AI future. So if you can take away one thing, I would be if you have the influence to be getting your companies to start investing in applied AI knowledge, etc. Cool, do that. If you don't have that influence, I'd be asking your leadership to start investing in that. Perfect,
Chris.
I mean, I'd almost look back at like all the digital ad evolutions that we've gone through over the past while, and everything around like this cookieless journey that we've gone on, programmatic advertising when that launched, whatever else, viewability, attention, all these major sort of milestones that we've gone through as an industry. They've all sort of followed a similar pattern, which is this initial exciting, everyone's obsessed with it, everyone run at it as quickly as possible and start throwing stuff out and see what happens, which is great, but then it quickly shifts to a bit of a slowdown, and marketers, agencies, rightfully so, asking questions around, well, hang on, how are we actually doing this? How are you guys actually doing this as a tech vendor, for example? So it's going to come back to transparency, probably like we've seen in the past. Agencies and marketers have done a really good job over the past few years in being able to interrogate more and more as we've gone through this privacy sort of journey, and it's going to be turboed even more now, I'd say. And then on the tech vendor side, we need to be as confident and, I guess, proactive as possible to be able to show how things are actually being made and what's going on behind the scenes.
And how they're working, yeah.
How they're working. Yeah.
Since it's about being remembered, keep your friends close and you and me closer. Make friends with the lawyers.
Brilliant. Let's thank the panelists.